Welcome Year 7 to today's Christian Life activity. Thank you so much for tuning in. I hope that your week is going well, that quarantine or isolation at home hasn't got you going too crazy, and that you've enjoyed our Zoom sessions so far, and that you're getting on okay with your parents, siblings, and pets still so far into week 1, or -1. Today in Christian Life, we're going to be having a look at a very topical topic. It is conflict. Now, if your family is anything like mine growing up and you have a couple of siblings, I'm sure that spending days cooped up inside has led you into some pretty funny conflicts. During the school holidays when I was a kid, I used to get into some pretty silly arguments with my brothers and sisters. I'm glad that we don't do that anymore, but hopefully this lesson today will give you guys some skills, or at least make you think more reflectively about conflict, why it happens, how it happens, and what we can do, as well as who Jesus was in all of this. What was his identity, and was he someone that did conflict? A very interesting thought. So without any further ado, let's get into it. So our learning goal for today is this, that you will learn whether or not Jesus was a pushover or a confronter. So someone that confronted people or someone that was able to be pushed around. Now, today we're going to be having a discussion, and the title of the discussion is called, What Would It Take? And so that's the first slide that we're going to be looking at today. What would it take? Now, there's some pretty intense things on this slide, and the idea is that we would have a look at these and think from a perspective of what would it take for you to confront your good friends. Now, often we want to stay on the right side of our good friends. We don't want to upset them or cause them any harm. And sometimes that puts us in a tough position where we want the best for them, but we also don't want to upset them. So below is a list of things that your friends might do someday. What I want you to do is this. Have a look at this list and place an exclamation mark next to the actions you would confront immediately. Place a plus sign next to the ones you might confront, and place the brackets next to the activity you would not confront. So what I want you to do right now is have a look at this list, pause the video, and in your Word document or on the submission page on iLearn, I want you to copy this list and do those things. So we have cheating in school, stealing money from parents, spreading rumors, drinking and driving, binging and purging, using drugs, having sex, bad-mouthing your favorite teacher, planning to have an abortion, selling drugs, lying to friends, making fun of one of your friends. And finally, the question, do you have a system for confronting and resolving conflict? Yes? Or if you do, can you describe your system? So at the bottom of your list where you have either put an exclamation mark, a plus sign, or a bracket, so left it just blank, then please describe your system for confronting your friends. So if you haven't already, pause the video and fill that list out now. All right, hopefully you have paused the video, you filled that list out, and we can move on. Now, just because you confront someone, it doesn't actually automatically mean that you've resolved the conflict. Especially with things like this, you could confront someone and they might not take your opinion seriously, or they might disagree with you. And so today what we're going to have a look at is some of the stages that a conflict can take. In fact, how you confront someone and what you say goes a long way in resolving conflict. So rather than have an explosive argument with your friend about one of those listed items and no longer being friends with them ever again, hopefully today we'll be able to identify some of the steps that conflict takes to prepare you for resolution. As we do this today, what I would love for you to do is to copy down the definitions or a summary of each of these stages as we have a chat about it. Okay, so again, on iLearn, copying the title and writing a small summary of what you think each step means. All right, stage 1 is tension. All conflicts have a beginning. This is where you first experience feelings of attention and know there is some type of friction between you and the other person. At this point, your feelings come into play, and you may feel angry or hurt, betrayed or misunderstood. A lot of the time we feel that way because we might think that what they're doing isn't right, and when we try and address it, we don't feel like we've been taken seriously at all, or that our feelings have been considered. Stage 2 is asking questions. This is where you begin to ask yourself questions such as, is this my fault? Do I have the right to be feeling this way? What did I do to deserve this? You're trying to figure out why you feel the way you do. This is the best stage to attempt to resolve your conflict. Take the questions you've been asking yourself and ask the person or parties, not actual like dance parties, but rather the group of people which you've been having conflict with. Do it right away and you get to skip stage 3. So this is a tough part because it requires a lot of maturity to confront people with these questions, especially if you're feeling confused or you're doubting whether or not you've done something wrong. All right, let's move on to stage 3. Stage 3, gathering information. This is the stage where anger takes over, and you begin thinking of ways to put the other person down or even get even with them. This stage is dangerous and should be avoided whenever possible. If you get stuck at this stage, the next stage can become a battleground. This is kind of the point where if you've skipped confronting the person in stage 2, you might be ruminating or kind of dwelling on the problem, and sometimes that can lead to it becoming a whole lot bigger in your mind than what it actually was in reality. And so it's not a healthy place to be in this gathering information stage. Stage 4, confrontation. This is a vital stage in the conflict cycle, despite the fact that probably if you've had confrontations before, they weren't very comfortable or very fun. But confrontation is really, really vital in reaching a resolution. Now, you can have a confrontation in stage 2 when you're asking questions, when you ask the person that you feel like you've had a falling out or have got some tension with what's going on, or if you've done something wrong. But if you're doing it down in stage 4, confrontation involves spending time with the other person or persons talking about the conflict. It's best to do this in a sensitive manner, with both sides getting the chance to express and explain their feelings. If there's been a lot of ammunition built up before this stage, the confrontation can be painful, difficult, and counterproductive. Now, in my experience as a brother, I've found that often this kind of stage, if there has been a lot of ammunition built up or a lot of little tensions that have built up, can sometimes turn into a tit for tat kind of thing. And you might recognize some conversations you've had with your brothers or sisters where as soon as someone says that you've done something wrong, you might say, well, they did, and insert whatever kind of wrong thing that they have done and it's not a great place to be because it doesn't help us reach a resolution. So it's important that we are humble when people are confronting us. And if we're doing the confronting, that we're doing it in a sensitive way. We're not trying to win. We're just trying to reach a resolution with that person. The next part is called making adjustments. So if the confrontation stage is managed well, you can just make adjustments to improve the relationship. Both parties should agree on the changes and talk about the specific expectations so the tensions can begin to diminish. It's best for both parties to do some changing and to work as a team in bringing resolution. This is really good. It requires a whole lot of maturity and humility, and for people to recognize that they both play a part in conflict and in tension. And finally, stage 6, resolution. The conflict is finally over and your life is moving back to normalcy. It doesn't mean the pain will be over, especially if you felt hurt in the tension, but it means you're moving forward towards forgiveness and getting on with your life. It's a really important thing, resolution. And resolution often involves forgiving someone if you've been wronged. A wise man once told me this, that when you forgive someone, it's like you're letting a person out of jail. But the kicker is this: the person that's in jail isn't the person that's saying sorry, but it's the person that's doing the forgiving. Because when you're holding a hurt against someone, the person that's done the wrong thing to you might not even know that you're upset, or they might not even know that they've done the wrong thing. And so it's always best to forgive, because then you get to let go of the hurt that you might be feeling. So here we have the whole cycle, the conflict cycle. We started at tension, we went to asking questions, gathering ammunition, confrontation, making adjustments, and then finally to the resolution. Now, the awesome thing about the cycle is that you can skip from asking questions all the way to resolution. And we now know that when we do confrontation, it doesn't need to be something that leads to more fighting or aggression or violence, but it actually can be something that we do so that we can bring the issues that we have forward in a nice, wise manner and solve those with the person. All right, so they're the 6 steps. Hopefully you've written a small summary of each of those steps. And if you haven't, feel free to go back through the video and have a look at those slides and take some notes to add to your list of things that you would talk to your friend about, the what would it take items. But for now, we're actually going to move on to the next part of our lesson, which is identifying these 6 things in the following video. So please sit back and enjoy. All right, so a pretty funny video from Monty Python, which is a bit of an older comedy series that has some pretty silly arguments in it. Hopefully you've never had an argument that is that silly. So please write down in the Word document that's attached to this lesson the different parts of the conflict cycle that you actually saw in that video. So did you see any tension, asking questions, gathering ammunition, confrontation, making adjustments, or a resolution? Now we're on to the last part of our lesson today. So Jesus is seen historically as this guy that often is described by modern day culture as being a very peaceful, wise person. And so we're going to explore how Jesus actually handled conflict and confrontation. So the Bible shows us specific instances where Jesus was involved with conflict. And so what I want us to do today is take a look at 3 of them. If you have time, look briefly at these examples with me. Before we begin, I'll talk to you about the overall idea. The big idea from this scripture is that Jesus confronted a situation that took people's eyes away from God. So Jesus wants you to confront those same issues in your life. Like on the first slide when we looked at the what would it take items, some of those items might be things that your friends are wanting to do or that society deems as okay. And some of these items might just be things that are distracting you or are not very helpful in your life. So let's read some of these verses. The first is from Luke 4:28-30. So all the people in the synagogue were furious when they heard this. They got up, drove him out of town, and took him to the brow of a hill on which the town was built in order to throw him off the cliff. But he walked right through the crowd and went on his way. In this conflict, Jesus didn't engage. He just avoided the conflict. He just walked on his way. In John chapter 8, verses 3-11, it says, the teachers of the law and the Pharisees brought in a woman caught in adultery. They made her stand before the group and said to Jesus, "Teacher, this woman was caught in the act of adultery. In the law, Moses commanded us to stone such a woman. Now what do you say?" They were using this question as a trap in order to have a basis for accusing Jesus. But Jesus bent down and started to write on the ground with his finger. When they kept on questioning him, he straightened up and said to them, "Let any one of you who is without sin be the first to throw a stone at her." Again, he stooped down and wrote on the ground. As this who heard began to go away one at a time, the older ones first, until only Jesus was left with the woman still standing there. Jesus straightened up and asked her, "Woman, where are they? Has no one condemned you?" "No one, sir," she said. then neither do I condemn you, Jesus declared. Go now and leave your life of sin. So in this one, he didn't avoid a conflict, but he did resolve it. What he did was, despite the woman who was breaking the law at the time in her sin, despite the fact that she hadn't done the right thing, Jesus said to the people accusing her, if you are without sin, then you can be the first one to throw a stone. What he did was he resolved the conflict by exposing the fact that all those people there that were so angry at this woman had also done wrong and weren't perfect either. Finally, Jesus clears the temple courts. When it was almost time for the Jewish Passover, Jesus went up to Jerusalem. In the temple courts, he found people selling cattle, sheep, and doves, and others sitting at tables exchanging money. So he made a whip out of the cords and drove all from the temple courts, both sheep and cattle. He scattered the coins of money changers and overturned their tables. To those who sold doves, he said, "Get these out of here. Stop turning my Father's house into a market." And this final example is of Jesus actually, he started a conflict. And the whole idea is this, from that scripture, like I said before, is that he confronted a situation that took people's eyes away from God. The temple is a place of worship, and these people had turned it into a thing where trinkets were sold and where people could make money. Jesus wants you to confront and turn away from these same kind of issues. He wants you to focus on how much he loves you and the good news of the Bible. And so that's where we're going to end today's lesson. I hope that you've understood how conflict isn't always necessarily a bad thing, but how it can be actually used to resolve issues. And I hope you've learned something that you didn't know about Jesus as well.